want to say welcome to the general membership meeting of the Washtenaw County Democratic Party, where we will have several topics that we're talking about today. And the first topic that we are going to address is our Candidates Corner, where we have 4 candidates that will be speaking today to let us know what they're running for. And our first candidate is
Ariane.
Ariane Slay. She's an attorney here in Washtenaw County, and she's running for Washtenaw County prosecutor. So go ahead, Ariane.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Thanks for taking part of your time this morning to be with us. I know it's nice outside, but this is extremely important. So sum it up. I am a mom from Ypsilanti Township. I grew up right here in the south side of Ann Arbor, where my mom actually still lives. I'm married to Sean Slay. He is a teacher at Ann Arbor Public Schools. And we have 2 fantastic children, Peyton and Landon. They are 7 and 11. And Peyton, I can't even believe it. My daughter's actually getting ready to be in middle school, which for you parents out there, you know that this next week we have all these rising scholars. It's really something to see them grow and persevere during this time of COVID and civil unrest. It's we still have a lot of raising to do with our kids. So more about me professionally. I started my career in criminal justice after I graduated from law school, working at the Washtenaw County Jail. I worked for Community Corrections, where I was an inmate program director. So part of my job there was to help the inmates return to the community and setting up services for them. So that would be making sure they had a job, a place to live, and that we looked at information about substance abuse and mental health and making sure that they had the services needed so that when they were returning to the community, they had things set in place. I waited and waited for a job at the county prosecutor's office because I only ever wanted to work where I live and where I plan to raise my family. And there was almost 3 years in between hires. And thankfully I was able to get that first job where I spent the next almost 10 years working as an assistant prosecutor. And during that time, for a little over 6, but not quite 7, I was the lead domestic violence prosecutor. I prosecuted every kind of case you can think of, from drunk driving to homicide, and everything in between. And I learned a lot during that time. I learned that sometimes I might be the only Black person in the courtroom that wasn't there as a defendant. I learned that some people were okay with that. I learned that when we brought over the inmates from the jail for court, they all looked like me and my husband and my family. And there were some people that actually probably preferred it that way. And in my later years as a prosecutor, after leaving the domestic violence unit, I went into general felonies. And during that time, I would look back and say, you know, I saw you 5, 6, 7 years ago on something very minor. And now you're here on a very serious case. And I realized that there was something that we had to do better, not just in the prosecutor's office, but as the community, to end this cycle. And so I suggested a lot of changes in the office. And at that time, I didn't have the autonomy to do it. It really was like being on a line. Blanket policies and procedures that have to be parsed out without real consideration as to who was standing with us and what the capabilities we had, not using our community resources. And that was a very challenging time. I left the office 3 years ago this coming fall because I was looking to change. I want to change our community and bring the system of punitive justice to one of rehabilitation and hope. And the way we do that is by addressing the root cause of what brought somebody to the criminal justice system. Now, I will tell you this right now, the prosecutor's office cannot do this alone. This is not just a prosecutor problem. This is not just a police problem. This will take a village. It will take everyone in this meeting and everyone in this community who needs to be at this meeting. We need to work together. And so Since I've been at the city, I've run the criminal division there, and I've been the courtroom prosecutor for the city of Ann Arbor. And I have been extremely blessed to have the autonomy to start these programs of diversion when somebody is in crisis for mental health, crisis for substance abuse, needs help finding employment. When that happens, we address that issue and we keep it moving. We're not saddling you with a criminal conviction. Our jails are full of people who aren't a danger to our community, so they shouldn't be there. Our jails are full of people who are in crisis for mental health. They should be with a doctor. Now, we started also using principles of restorative justice, doing victim and offender conferencing. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I wish I had another hour to talk to you about it. But it's very simple. It allows people to be accountable for their actions, to share what's truly important and address the root cause, and then find healing. And out of that healing, oftentimes comes respect. The other thing that I'm extremely passionate about is my commitment to education. And that's not just for the education of the prosecutor's office and our staff, but it is education and collaboration of law enforcement. Years ago, when I saw things that I did not like about the police department, yes, I was vocal. Yes, I wrote letters. Yes, I talked to chiefs, but it's about doing. So I became a certified MCOLS instructor. It means I teach the police. I joined the staff at the Washtenaw Community College Police Academy, where I still teach there today. I teach nationally and all over the state of Michigan, because when we will do better when we know better. And if we decide in our hearts that we don't want to know better, then we wish you gone. So I need help in that capacity as well to partner with our communities. I teach about domestic violence and strangulation and trauma-based interviewing and respecting different cultures. We all have these great talents out there. So I am asking each and every one of you to add into this conversation. What can you do to help bring us into a community, into community policing? We have the right as community members to demand how we are policed. And that should be with equity and respect every time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I wish I could go on forever, but I will be gracious with your time. ArianneSlay.com. Please visit us or follow us on Facebook if you'd like more information. I have had the same cell phone number since 1996. Feel free to give me a call. I will be accessible to you now, just as I will be if elected in office. Please, everyone, be safe. And thank you so much for having me this morning.
Okay, thank you, Ariane.
Sure.
Ariana.
Ariane. Remember Johnny Mathis, Ariane?
Ariane. Ariane.
It's like Marianne from Gilligan without the M.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So next up, we have Arain Washington. She's also an attorney here in Washtenaw County, and she's a candidate for 14B District Court Judge. Okay.
Thank you.
Ariane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Codrington. I'm going to call you Loretta, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Good morning to the Washtenaw County Democratic Party. And thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate another opportunity to speak to you all. I know I was here last month with a judicial panel. However, there are a few things that I think I left out, and I wanted to try to highlight those for you today. As I was just introduced, my name is Arain. It's in hard E, like E and rain outside, Arain Washington. And I am running for the position of judge of the 14B District Court. I am coming to you as a person who grew up in Ann Arbor, but has been a resident of Ypsilanti Township for the past 26 years. My children went to the schools in Ypsilanti Township, and they graduated from Lincoln High Schools. I've been here for the majority of my life at this particular point. I am a graduate of the Michigan State University and then the University of Michigan for law school. I've been practicing law for 27 years. And what does that mean? That means that I have been a litigator in every single court in Washtenaw County before every single judge. Means I've gone in front of the judges and I've made the arguments and actually gotten rulings and decisions. That is a very important part for a judgeship. And I'm the only candidate in this particular race that has that type of litigation experience. So I wanted to make sure that the Washtenaw County Democratic Party knew that piece, because I don't think I highlighted that last time I was here. Having litigation experience is important, because a part of what a district court judge does is they handle what's called preliminary examinations. They handle probable cause hearings. When a defendant comes before a judge to make a decision about whether or not this case should be bound over to circuit court in felony matters. When we talk about district court, we always talk about the misdemeanors and the landlord-tenant and the things that are solely, strictly district court. But it's also important to remember that a district court judge makes decisions about who's going to be tried at the felony court level. And you don't want just anyone making those decisions. You want somebody who has experience making those decisions. Additionally, I think it's important that you recognize that I have experience working for a judge. And in that role, what I did was review everything that came across the judge's desk, condensed it down to something that he could review and make a decision on. And if he didn't make a decision, I wrote those opinions. All of that is extremely important for how a judge is going to function in the 14B district court. And in addition to that, I help him reorganize a whole court. And many of the principles that are available and were put in place in 2006 are still in place to date. So I have experience with reorganizing a court. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is a little bit of my vision for 14B. I want you to understand that mental health, restorative justice, transparency, and building collaborative relationships are very important. I have the personality and the character to be able to, first of all, see what is needed, because we have some missing. And then secondly, I have the ability to establish those collaborative relationships, and I've already begun that. I have collaborative relationships with NAMI, I have collaborative relationships with Community Mental Health, Home and New Vision, all the places where you need to have the resources that are gonna benefit Ypsilanti Township, an area that is extremely socioeconomically depressed and has the highest population of people of color who actually need that type of assistance. I intend to carry on the substance use disorder court that is there, but I want to bring in additional resources. I'm highly endorsed. I'm endorsed by, and I'm just going to give you a few of them because I have over 200 endorsers. Many of you are probably on my endorsement list, and I thank you so much for that. Chief Judge of the Supreme Court, Bridget Mary McCormick. Chief Judge of the 22nd Court, Carol Conkey. Judge Timothy Connors, Cedric Simpson, Anna Freshour, Nancy Willer, Betty Widgeon, Jerry Clayton, the Delphia Simpson, and 4 out of the 5 countywides. I hope you will go to my website, which is irainforjudge.com, and actually sign up to become a part of my team. And if you want to find me on Facebook, please do. Irain Washington for 14B District Court Judge. I thank you for your time this morning, and I hope you all stay safe. Thank you. And I also wanted to mention I'm also a past statutory vice chair of this organization. Wanted to make sure you knew that.
Okay, thank you, Irain. We appreciate that. Okay, so there's a slight change in the agenda only because Congresswoman Dingell has to leave. So it looks like we're going to have her speak next, if that's okay with everybody. Congresswoman Dingell, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We
Can you
hear
see me?
I can see you. Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am getting ready to march downriver, and it's really great to see so many people here coming together in solidarity on what's happening in this country right now. It's not communities that you always normally see this in, and it's been an incredible week as I have walked with many people all over this district. We're at a crossroads. You know, Martin Luther King said that riots are the language of the unheard. And I think that Americans across this country of all backgrounds, ages, race, creed, and color are trying to listen to each other. We need to listen to each other more than we ever have. We are at a crossroads. So I just encourage all of us to really take the time to listen and to hear each other, to understand people's different perspectives. In Washington, we are going to be, the Judiciary Committee will begin hearings Wednesday on a number of critical subjects, including criminal justice reform, racial profiling, and other issues. And we are hoping that the Black Caucus will take the lead on a bill that we will move this month yet in the House of Representatives. I'm in an awkward place, so I didn't want to not be with you, but I wanted you to know that a lot of us are working together on a lot of tough subjects. COVID is not gone, which is why you see me with my mask on. I ask people, we can go back out. We need people right now. I posted today about the need for passion, compassion, kindness. We need to be sensitive to each other, but we also need to remember COVID is real and we don't want another spike. So wear your masks, keep your physical distance, and wash your hands. That if you're like me, it really feels good to be out in community with other people. So stay safe. I'm sorry I can't be there, but I think you'd all approve of what I am doing this morning. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Congresswoman Dingo. And thanks for your service and your good work. Okay, so next up we have Justin Hodge, Professor Justin Hodge, and he's a candidate for Washtenaw County Commissioner. Justin, you should unmute and you're on.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Justin Hodge. You know me because I'm on the executive board for the county party. I'm also a social worker and a professor of social work at the University of Michigan. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for the yellow card so I don't go over. But I'm running for Washtenaw County Commissioner because I believe that everybody in our county should have the opportunity to be healthy, to build wealth, and to be safe. No matter where you live in the county, you should be able to have access to quality and affordable health care, and transportation shouldn't be an issue in you seeing a provider, which is the case for many people because we have challenges with regional transport. And you should be able to get a good job no matter where you live so you can provide for yourselves and your loved ones, so you can build wealth and purchase a home if you so choose. And of course, you should feel safe no matter where you are in the county. Your zip code should not determine the opportunities that are available to you, but for so many in our county, that's exactly what ends up happening. So I'm about to throw a whole bunch of statistics at you to demonstrate that and why we need to be taking action on this now. So we have a very booming housing market in our county, and we rank as the overall healthiest county in our state, but we have some really significant disparities between communities across the county. So we look at health disparities, so my district includes most of Ypsilanti Township and all of Augusta Township. And individuals that live in those two townships have on average a life expectancy of 6 years less than someone living in Ann Arbor. And countywide, African Americans live on average 10 years less than their white neighbors, and Latino residents live up to 16 years less. And looking at wealth disparities, the household income in Ypsilanti Township on average is about $12,000 less than it is in Ann Arbor. And African American households have about a half of median income compared to white households. So all of those issues contribute to Washtenaw County being one of the most economically segregated regions in the entire country. And COVID-19 has shined a spotlight on those inequities facing our county. And so the people that live in my district are disproportionately affected by that. So I live in Sugarbrook, which is in the 48198 zip code. And that zip code and the adjacent one, 48197, together make up almost half of the COVID-19 cases in the whole county. And despite only being 12% of our county's population, African Americans make up about a third of the confirmed cases in the county. So these health and wealth inequities have been something that have been plaguing us for a long time, have been something that I've been fighting against for years. Now people are really focused on it, and I'm hoping that we can make some serious change with it. So during throughout my career, when I was practicing as a clinical social worker, I used to provide child and family therapy to low-income families and a lot of financial empowerment work. Doing that gave me good experience working with county-level government. Now, as a professor of social work at the University of Michigan, I work to get my students to engage in policy work and direct community action. So for example, I've done a lot of work in getting students involved in my own neighborhood, working to address infrastructure issues, gathering signatures to take problems to the Roads Commission, developing action teams to get residents more engaged in what's happening here. And also, I serve the county on a number of different boards and commissions. So I'm on our Community Action Board, which focuses on addressing economic inequality in our county. So what we do there is we focus a lot on Eastern Washtenaw County and Western Washtenaw County because that's where the concentrated poverty is at in our county. It looks different between the two, but we focus on getting programming out there. One example that I'll talk about, and if you go to our website, you can see me talking to the county commission about this children's savings account program that me and my colleagues at the university have been proposing, which would give all kindergartners that start school in the Lansing school, in the Washtenaw County, a college savings account. We did a similar program in the Lansing School District, so we have a lot of research that shows how effective this can be. And without boring with all those details, the big thing that you should think about is that even if a kid goes through K through 12 with only a few $100s in their savings account, they're up to 4 times more likely to go to college. Because they've developed this mentality that they're going to save and go to college. So we're hoping to bring some of that kind of programming here too. I'm also on our Board of Health, which advises the health department, which is, you see as in the news all the time now because of the response to COVID. And I serve as chair of the Sheriff's Community Advisory Board for Law Enforcement, which also you have seen a lot in the news because of the incident in Apple Ridge, and my board will be doing a citizen review of that. So I've been working with our county for years to make it a safer place and to make it a place where people have the opportunity to build wealth and to be healthier. So our campaign is about making our county a place where race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status don't determine your destiny, and a place where everybody has the opportunity to thrive and be successful. So I want you to learn more about our vision. We've got a lot of information on our website at votejustinhodge.com. But of course, please, if you're in the district, get your absentee ballot and vote now for me for county commissioner. And if you're not in the district, we certainly need volunteers and donations because it's hard fundraising during the pandemic. But thank you for the time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. So our next panelist is going to be Attorney Eli Savitt, and Attorney Savitt is running for Washtenaw County Prosecutor. So Attorney Savitt, are you here?
I am here, and how you doing? It's great to virtually be here this morning. Many of you know me because I've been involved in the party for years. I'm on the executive board here. I am the bylaws and resolutions vice chair because I'm a lawyer and I'm one of the few people that really likes bylaws. So, but I, a little bit about myself. I grew up, born and raised in Washtenaw County, graduated from Pioneer High School in 2001. I actually started my career as a public school history teacher. I taught 8th grade, special education, general education classes. And that's an experience that really informs a lot of my subsequent work, and one of the main reasons I am running for prosecutor because I saw in my classroom the adverse effects of the school to prison pipeline and our system of mass incarceration on my kids and their families. I went back to law school, graduated from the University of Michigan Law School, started my career in private practice where I represented everybody from criminal defendants to folks that were facing deportation, members of our immigrant community, victims of domestic violence and spousal abuse, victims of consumer fraud, and kids seeking to vindicate their right to an education, kids with special needs. After that, I had the tremendous opportunity to work for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. And after that, I was sort of at a fork in the road. And so I decided that I didn't want to be a DC lawyer. I wanted to come back to the community that I was born and raised in, move back to Ann Arbor, settle down here. I actually accepted a job as the senior legal counsel at the city of Detroit. And in that capacity, I do a lot of civil rights work. I'm fundamentally a civil rights lawyer, and what we do is I'm in charge of all of our public interest litigation work. So I oversee thousands of cases that we bring in the public interest. We're suing the opioid industry for the damage they have caused to our community. We sue banks and slumlords that maintain their housing in dilapidated conditions and put kids at risk of lead poisoning. If any of you have been following the right to literacy lawsuit that's going on out of Detroit, that's my case as well. And I also lead our criminal justice reform work. One of the things that I have seen throughout my career is that our system of mass incarceration is not just about what happens when people are behind bars, but it is about the cascading consequences that happen after you're released with the stigma of a criminal conviction. Holds people back from getting jobs. It holds people back from getting housing. It holds people back from continuing their education. And so I'm proud to lead work in my current job to expand the eligibility for expungement in the state of Michigan so people can get those old records off their record and move forward with their lives and be rehabilitated. So I'm not a prosecutor. I'm a civil rights lawyer. That's how I chose to dedicate my career, but I'm running for prosecutor. And the reason why is because at every step of my career, from my first job as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher, through my perspective nationally working for Justice Ginsburg, and now in my day job at the city of Detroit, I have seen how our system of mass incarceration and our two systems of justice is holding us back at every part of society. And there's a couple of parts for that. Number one, we are criminalizing poverty. We are criminalizing childhood. We are disproportionately sentencing younger people, Black and brown people, people of lower socioeconomic status to harsh jail and prison sentences and saddling them with criminal convictions that will stick through them for the rest of their lives. That's unfair, that's unjust, and I'm committed to changing that. The other side of it is far too frequently, wealthier people, corporations, are able to escape accountability when they harm the community. And this is what I've spent a large part of my career doing, is going toe to toe with some of the biggest corporations in the United States. You talk about the opioid industry, Shell, Exxon, corporate polluters. They need to be held accountable. They need to be held accountable when they harm our community. They need to be held accountable when they engage in wage theft and hurt workers. We should not have one system of justice that penalizes poverty, that penalizes childhood mistakes, and another system of justice that allows corporations to harm the community without any consequences. So, I have been on this campaign trail for over a year now, and the sort of gravamonte of our campaign from the very start has been ending the era of mass incarceration and building a justice system that we can be proud of here in Washtenaw County. I have an 18-point plan up on my website, eli2020.com. I'll just mention highlights. We have a robust plan to not see cash bail in an equitable system, which holds people in jail simply because they cannot afford to pay, to end racial and socioeconomic inequity in our county, to treat kids like kids, and to facilitate restorative justice, rehabilitation, and healing in our justice system. I obviously don't have time to go over all 18 points today, but I'll just mention that I'm proud of the movement that we're building. I think it is time for a change. I think that we've seen real energy around criminal justice reform in the last few years. Okay, and so if you go to my website, you can read more. This time goes fast. I'm a lawyer and I like to talk. So, but thank you for the opportunity, and please reach out to me if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Sabat. We appreciate that. Okay, so next up is our Chair's Corner, our Chair's Report, and that's going to include or start with Chris Savage. So I'm going to let Chris take over.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks to Loretta, who is on her solo flight for the first time as the host of a webinar here for our general membership meeting. Doing a great job.
Thank you.
This has been a really tough couple of weeks for everybody. I think everybody understands what's happening. And The photo that you're looking at right there on the screen is our Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, just a couple of days ago at a memorial for George Floyd. We're at a time right now where it's easy to feel hopeless. It's easy to feel like things are out of control, and yet there's reason for hope right now, in my opinion. And when we've got legislators who are willing to lay face down on the concrete with their hands behind their back, publicly displaying their solidarity with this new movement, or it's not a new movement, actually, it's a decades old movement that's just now getting a new infusion of participation from citizens all around the country. I believe that we are at a turning point, and it's a turning point that I think should give us hope. I would like to tell you a little story, just really briefly. A few nights ago, I got a text from our Vice Chair, Mary Hall Sham, saying that she had driven through Dexter and was really proud of us because there was a group of young boys and girls, probably high school age, who were protesting at the gazebo in right downtown Dexter, just holding signs in support of social justice and racial justice and justice for George Floyd. And I was pretty proud of that because our little town is about as white as they come, and we're not really known for our political activism, yet these young people were out there doing that. Then a couple of days later, I drove by and they were still there. They were back. And that, I actually was very emotional when I saw that, because this was the first time I'd ever seen any kind of sustained political activism, particularly on this issue, from a small white town. Satish, if you could put the other photo up. Then last night, they were joined by the adults in the community. Satish, yeah. So this was the scene in the downtown park last night in Dexter. I think I saw about 2 people of color in that group. There were about 300 people there. This was basically a small white town showing up. And we had about 300 people there, and they all knelt for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the time that George Floyd had a cop's knee on his neck until he died. And it was pretty remarkable. And the same kinds of things are happening in Chelsea. They've had protests and vigils there repeatedly for the past week. In Saline, they lined for 2 city blocks in all directions at the Four Corners a couple of nights ago. Even in Houghton Hancock up in the Upper Peninsula, they're having protests. Now, I'm not saying this to say yay white people. And I'm not saying this to say problem solved, because neither of those things is true. What I'm saying is that if we want to have change that is actually impactful and is going to change policy and change law and change how we do things in this country when it comes to social justice and racial justice, this is a necessary first step. White people in this country have to step up and become part of the process and become allies to people of color who are experiencing inequities and injustice on a daily basis, and have since we brought them over largely from their home country to be slaves in this country. So not yay white people, but yay, maybe we are at a turning point here. And this is the necessary first step so that we can enact change that began in the 60s in terms of civil rights and needs to be carried further now. So there's reason for hope. We need to keep doing this. This needs to go beyond just protests in the park, but this is a good sign to me. So I just wanted to bring that up because this is an important thing. And it's important that we all keep hope alive in our hearts, because without hope, we can't do this. But white people need to start becoming true allies to people of color and putting themselves in harm's way if necessary, making sacrifices, and doing the things that the people of color who have been doing this all along have been doing, but now taking a really crucial next step. So with that, I'll turn it over to our state senator, Jeff Irwin, who I used to call state House rep, and now he's state senator. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Can you hear me? I'm not
Yes,
seeing.
we can.
You can? Good, thank you. So, hey, thank you for that, Chris. That was, a touching report. And, one of the things, just to touch briefly on the protests, we've seen these protests all over Michigan, and seeing them in Dexter, and also it looks like Congressman Dingell is walking in downriver right now. I do think that's significant in terms of the changing politics around this important issue. I've had a privilege to participate and stand in solidarity and protest here in in Washtenaw County, but I think it's very, very significant that we're seeing protests in places, like Downriver, like Allen Park, like Dexter, and others. I know there was a protest up in my original hometown of Sault Ste. Marie, which is pretty remarkable. So I did want to give you an update on other things that are happening in Lansing. I want to let everyone know that there is still a lot of trouble happening with folks who are struggling because of the impact from COVID-19. There are a lot of folks who are still unable to connect with their unemployment. If you know anyone who has been unable to connect and is eligible for unemployment or who thinks they might be eligible for unemployment, please send them to your legislators. I know that all of my other colleagues in the Washtenaw delegation have been, and their staffs and my staff have been working very, very hard on trying to connect people with unemployment and connect those dots. This is very, very important that people get the support they need through these difficult times. Also recently, the federal government has come into Michigan and pretty much every state and required a certain fraud protection effort, which has caused about 350,000 people who were receiving unemployment benefits to have their benefits suspended. If that's happened to you and you need any help working through that process, please seek out help from your legislative offices. We're here to help. It's taking a long time to get people through the process, but people are getting through. We're also still working on budget supplementals related to COVID-19. There are two parts of that. One is that we're trying to provide more support to our communities that need it. We've got some resources from the state and federal government set aside. And right now we're debating a $508 million package that has passed the Senate and gone over to the House. The element of this package that I'm most excited about is an issue that I've been working on for many, many years. And that is a pay increase for the essential workers who are providing home health care to our elderly and disabled citizens. This is something that many of us have been working on for years. And in this bill is a $3 an hour increase for these folks. And when it came to the Senate floor, I spoke about making this permanent because these folks are essential workers and they need this support. We're also talking about additional support for our local governments. You all should know that a lot of our local governments in Washtenaw County have stepped up to help folks who are in need, whether that's with trying to provide housing to the homeless or to step up for some of the emergent public health needs at Washtenaw County Public Health. We're trying to get more of these dollars into the hands of our local governments who've really been the ones on the front lines of responding to COVID-19. Going forward, we have also just started to deal with the negative budget impact of having the state shut down. And that looks like about a $6 billion shortfall over the course of the next 2.5 years, and $1 billion the state is going to have to cut in the next few months before October 1st in this fiscal year if we don't get some additional support from the federal government. Now, if you're like me, you think, I'll just speak for myself. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the federal government has bailed out Carnival Cruises and Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and a bunch of big businesses, airlines that used billions of dollars to buy back stocks to boost their executive pay when we can't bail out our schools and our health clinics. That is just absurd. And so Congress has to act. Hopefully they will. But in the meantime, the legislature is debating what will happen if we don't get that support from Congress, which means meaningful cuts to all the things we care about in human services and education. Also, I just want to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the legislature around trying to fight racism and particularly reduce violence and police brutality. This is an issue that many of us have been working on for many years, and I think that because of what's happened recently, the tragedies and the public response, there is maybe a greater opportunity to get something done on these important issues. The legislature has acted on my bill to increase police training. It passed unanimously from the Senate this week. This bill would add the requirement that all police officers get continuing education and be exposed to implicit bias training, violence de-escalation training, and training in recognizing people in mental health distress. This is, I think, important, but a tiny step. We also need to have citizen oversight for our police departments. We also need to have independent investigations when there are allegations of misconduct. And we also need to get better reporting and better control over use of force policies. We need to do a better job of holding police officers accountable, because I think that what the public is responding to in part is this sense that the culture is broken in the police departments, and there's this impunity and there's this lack of accountability. And even when people break the law, even when they break the law year after year, and there are mountains of complaints and there are videotapes of them doing it, there still isn't the kind of punishment that we demand and that justice demands. And so I want you to know that we're working on a wide range of ideas to try to improve these policies. This work has to happen, at kitchen tables and at city councils and in police departments, but it also has to happen in the state legislature. So if you have more ideas for me, I can assure you that myself and the other legislators in your Washtenaw County delegation are eager to work with you on how we can be a part of a solution. So thank you for this opportunity this morning.
All right. Chris, next up.
Is it me? Oh, I think it's the precinct organizing committee.
Yeah, I think
There
it's
we go.
Janet. Janet, are you there? I see you.
Janet, you need to unmute.
Yeah,
I have
hang
to do
on.
it myself, gosh.
There you go,
Okay.
yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I am going to share my screen. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right, so a lot of people have been asking, what are we doing about the election? And just the first thing of all is to realize voting is not enough. It's far from enough, but we have things happening now to back it up. And if we don't vote, we'll get nowhere anyway. So a few home truths. Democrats are the majority overall, Dems or leaning Dems, but there are two big factors that reduce our effectiveness. First is the unfair weighting of Republican voters through gerrymandering and through the fundamental inequality of the Senate, but we can't do a lot about that for now. But we also have a lot of Dems who think it's safe to let others do the work. Washtenaw voters think of ourselves as safely blue. So even in the blue wave in 2018, we were still at only 63% turnout. This we can do something about. So in fact, there are enough non-voting Dems in Washtenaw to make up those 11,700 votes from 2016 several times over. And our mission is to get every one of them. But if we want to really reach people, we need to build our presence. The just in time, just showing up for the election just doesn't cut it. So it's well known that relationships are the best way to foster engagement. And our strategy this year, especially while we're unable to knock doors, is to seek out and build those relationships. We're using a locally developed web tool called Wave to help contact people around us. We'll go into that a little later. This is our famous graph showing how since 2017, we see this consistent pattern. Reliable Republican turnout, 50 to 60,000, and the Dem seesaw, presidential to midterms. We broke that pattern in 2018, helped by the enthusiasm for the propositions that are doing so much to improve our elections, but also by field engagement on a really large scale. Even more than just getting people to vote, getting them the info they need for an informed vote is crucial and very much appreciated. With the voter guide, we call people's attention to the down ballot races that are so important. Drop-off is where a voter votes straight ticket but isn't well enough informed to make a good choice in the nonpartisan section. This is a real break on Dem effectiveness. Here we see the drop-off when people are invited to vote for more than 2 candidates. Many will still just choose 2, bottom line there, the bottom dots, out of 4 slots to be filled. And the judicial races are really badly affected by this. While we were participating in that recount effort that didn't go anywhere, one of our volunteers witnessed many Dem voters choosing state Supreme Court candidates who don't represent their values. So we always say that this election is crucial, but that's really hitting home this time, and we have a real opportunity. Many of these seats are considered to be in play. So if the election is not derailed, we may be able to have real change. Re-electing Michigan Supreme Court Justice Mary Bridget McCormack, I hope that's right, and adding Elizabeth Welch to the bench will be huge. The state Senate is overdue for new Dem leadership. We can get some wonderful new state reps, and we can even hope, with your help, for a strong campaign for Gretchen Driscoll against Wahlberg. Local races are really important too. And once the primaries have determined our candidates, precinct work will help people get to know those candidates. So what's the 1, 2, 3 of precinct organizing, of organizing activists? First, get us together, then engage the voters, and then get out the vote. So this is how we're doing it. We're so lucky to have a team with a lot of different skills. We have Erica Terry. Well, this way, I didn't actually go through this, one sec. So our precinct organizing committee has a number of different people taking care of the different areas. We've got a team for recruitment, Erica Terry, Loretta Codrington, who's running our meeting today. They do the recruiting the precinct delegates and walk them through the process of getting on the ballot. Brian Greminger and Liz Schaefer are preparing the training for our organizers. Dirk Mayhew doing amazing stuff with data, van training and insight. Our 3 vice chairs working on getting the right messaging to support the effort and connecting us with other groups. And above all, a dedicated team supporting voter mobilization. We have Ed Saunders, Sandy Levitsky, and Liz Schaefer, who've recruited a great team of area captains. They're sort of like super volunteers who've taken on the task of organizing and supporting precinct organizers and delegates in their geographical areas. They provide weekly guidance on our message, ways to reach voters, and training on how to use the tools that we are using: Wave, texting, phone banking, and Van. So this is almost all of us. We didn't get Brian in this one, in this shot. So this is just a look at what our maps. These are the areas that we've set up. The area captain structure was borrowed from the Voters Not Politicians campaign. And we're so grateful to the captains who have come to us actually from that effort. Some of them were not specialists, particularly WCDP before this. So this is the overall county. Looking a little closer, Ypsilanti has lots of people. So we have 3 separate areas for the city and the 2 townships. And this is Ann Arbor divided up by the wards. And these are our amazing 24 area captains for those 15 areas. So if we were all together, we would say, give them a round of applause. Instead of saying that, let's say, get in touch with them if you're in their area. This is an early picture. These are the people who stepped up right at the beginning. And as you know, it's grown a lot since then.
Okay.
So what do over 100 precinct delegates and precinct organizers do? They interact with the voters. Well, I don't need to read you this. You can read it.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to skip through that a little because it got a little longer. So just to say what we are actually doing now. Well, we won't talk about this because I think most people in the meeting probably know precinct delegates, precinct organizers. We're putting a lot of emphasis on having organizers, some of whom are delegates this year. So whatever role you want to play, join us. This is what we're doing, connecting with the phone through all these ways, and this web-based tool called Wave, which we can teach you to, your area captain will teach you to use.
Okay.
Okay, last bits. How do you get an
Janet?
absentee ballot? Fill
Janet?
out that postcard. Yeah, are we running out of time?
Yeah, we're running out of time. And also too, there's a couple of questions too regarding precinct delegates and that we have. And I had set
Okay, let's
aside
stop
for
and do the questions, sure.
a couple questions. So if you want to do that real quick, so
Sure.
we can get ready to start the rest of the meeting.
Are they on?
They're
on the
okay.
chat?
Yeah, just, okay. So one question is, please provide us with contact information for the area contacts. Captain, sorry.
Okay, let me
And,
just run right up to the last slide, and that will tell you what to do. So go through our volunteer recruitment team, and they will get you connected to your captain.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. So that answers both of those questions.
All right. Good. Thank you so
Okay.
much, and hope to see you, everybody joining.
All right.
Have a great day.
Okay, thank you, Janet. And I just want to say thank you to all all of the candidates who were here. I didn't get a chance to say that, and to also to the update from the chair and from
Okay.
Senator Irwin, and also to you.
We did it right.
Thank you. Okay, so
We covered it.
we are about to start the other portion of the meeting, which is
Continue.
open up the meeting to the main portion, which is our talk about COVID-19 and its effects on the African American community and reparations. And so I want to make sure that I have all of my panelists here. I think they're all here.
CDs and stuff.
And so I'm just going to take 1 second here and
I didn't want to get any more money.
make sure that we have everybody that's going to be on this panel. And also too, I want you guys to know that the attendees, if you have questions for our panelists, we have some questions throughout this discussion, but if you have questions, you can raise your hand. There's a raise hand button that you should have. You can raise your hand and ask questions of the panelists that are here for this section. Everybody else, I'm going to make you an attendee so we can only see the panelists.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. All right, so let me, without further ado, do some introductions here. My notes. Okay, so first off, I want to say thank you for the panelists that are here for this discussion. We have Dr. Joanne Watson. She is a professor with Washtenaw County Community College, and also a member of NCOBRA, and I'm going to have her help explain what NCOBRA is about. Also, we're going to talk a bit about HR 40, and then we also have Sheriff Jerry Clayton, who's here from Washtenaw County Sheriff Department, and Charles Chuck Wilson, who is with the Washtenaw County Health Department. He's going to help us understand about COVID and what's been happening with that here in our community. And also to rounding out the panel is attorney and Professor Robin L. McCoy with McCoy and Associates. So thank you guys for being here. I so appreciate it. It's been a little while getting everybody together, and I appreciate that, and so does everybody else that are here. The thing that I want to say again to the attendees and to the people that are listening, that if you have a question for one of the panelists, please do raise your hand, and I will make sure that we can get that question to the specific panel that you're speaking to. But first, I want to start with Dr. Watson. Are you here, Dr. Watson?
I am.
Okay, there you are. Awesome. Okay, so, you know, we are living in some really terrible times right now, but also some pretty interesting times with the all the marches and the protests that are going on. We're not going to talk about that just yet, but we want to talk about, want you to explain a little bit about NCOBRA and HR 40. I think NCOBRA is involved with that, and then we'll go on to the rest of the conversation.
First of all, thank you very much, Loretta Codrington. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate your hard work with the Washtenaw Democratic Party. As an alumnus of the University of Michigan, who majored in journalism at U of M, I feel very much at home with the Washtenaw Democratic Party because I was a resident of Washtenaw County for many years as a student at U of M. Loved it. I'm currently a professor at Wayne County Community College District, where I teach English and journalism. I have to admit that as a secretary of the Black Action Movement that shut down the university and demanded 10% Black enrollment and 10% Black faculty, I don't think they were unhappy to see me graduate and move on. Let me say, I was very blessed to have been involved with the reparations early on. As a matter of fact, reparations Ray Jenkins, who was one of my mentors, he convinced Congressman John Conyers to introduce H.R. 40, a reparations study bill, in 1989, directly as a result of him witnessing the Japanese American Citizens League having success with the passage of the Civil Rights Redress Law in Congress that granted reparations $20,000 per Japanese American and a letter of apology because of the internment during World War II. Reparations Ray Jenkins, who was a friend of the congressman's, did not let the congressman rest. He followed him around to every public meeting and would stand up unafraid and go to the microphone and say, John, Congressman, we need reparation. I demand reparations. And ultimately the congressman said yes, and it was named H.R. 40. The 40 was deliberately selected because of course the 40 acres, and some always say 40 acres, and the 40 acres was never manifested, notwithstanding the promise made during the Emancipation Proclamation. So the significance of H.R. 40, which had some co-sponsors along with the Congressman Conyers, but now has many more, with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is the current sponsor out of Texas. And at this point, there are 126 co-sponsors of H.R. 40. 126, and when it reaches 150, the Congresswoman says she wants to take it to the congressional floor, House floor for a vote. That's game changing. It's a game changing. It was never that high in years past, and it's been introduced every year since 1989. So this is a time that those persons who support reparations should release all of their energy to impact those persons who have not signed on, and to make sure that they do the right thing. Reparations is nothing new for America and for other countries around the world. We should know the long list of groups have been paid reparations, not just the Japanese Americans who would righteously do reparations, but indigenous people, sometimes called Native Americans, Hawaiian natives, many groups have received reparations. I wrote a chapter in a book called Should America Pay, a book edited by Ray Wimbush, and there's a whole listing of the organizations who manifested reparations being given to their groups. You should look that up. It's important that you know that H.R. 40 has now been rewritten. It started off as a study bill. It was fashioned after the Japanese American bill, but now it's a remedy bill. It's not just study anymore. It's been rewritten. I was one of the people who worked with Cam Howard, national co-chair of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, where I'm on the national board, to help rewrite H.R. 40. We don't need to study it anymore. There's a long list of studies that have been done to show that people of African descent are in fact due reparations, need remedies. There was also a companion bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 1083, that's sponsored by Senator Cory Booker, which is something new. They have 14 sponsors. With all the upheaval going on in the United States of America, now was a perfect time for reparations to ascend to the top priority, not just of people of African descent, but everybody, in order to make America whole. When you consider next year is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, 100 years ago, 1921, there was a massacre of Africans in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, as the Europeans, whites actually bombed them using federal equipment.
Right.
And absolutely massacred blacks because they were creating their own businesses. The black dollar was going round and round and round, and that led to this massacre. When you consider the Louisiana Purchase that was paid for by profits from the slave trade, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States, doubled the size of the current United States. And that Louisiana Purchase was paid for by profits from the slave trade. When you consider lynchings and terrorism, the OBGYN profession got started based on doctors practicing on African women who were enslaved with no anesthesia. When you consider the Tuskegee experiment, the prison industry, the criminal justice, and we don't have to talk about the criminal injustice when you look at the protests and demonstrations happening all over the world because somebody decided to lynch a black man on the streets of Minneapolis. Come on, somebody. It's significant.
Professor,
Yes.
if I can ask a question, there's a question out there too. I'm gonna, Gail Summers has a question, but let me just ask you this, and then I'll direct some questions to some of the other panelists. But you mentioned there are several organizations that are talking about reparations right now. So what makes NCOBRA different? Can you speak to that?
Well, NCOBRA has been on the vanguard, at the lead. I'm on the national board of NCOBRA, been a long time. I'm also a national board member of a group called the National African American Reparations Commission, and that's led by Dr. Ron Daniels. There's another national group led by Dr. Ray Wimbush out of Morgan State University, and that's called #40. So there are a number of organizations that have been working steadfastly on reparations. Even within the past week, Bob Johnson, who's the founder of BET, has publicly demanded $14 trillion be awarded to Africans in this country because of the reparations that are rightfully due. But NCOBRA which is a volunteer organization of coalitions who have come together for more than 30 years, spearheading the efforts and making the case that reparations are due based upon the wrongs and the injuries that have been done, and also showing a precedent. The United States has a precedent of paying reparations. Other countries have a precedent of paying reparations. So there is no reason for reparations to be upheld. And furthermore, many of these issues were addressed in the Emancipation Proclamation, but never manifested because the president who signed the Emancipation Proclamation was assassinated. The reason he was assassinated, according to the words of the assassin, was because of the promises to Africans. So reparations is a debt owed, it's not a handout.
Okay. Gail Summerhill has a question. Gail, are you there?
I'm here, but actually I hit it by, but now that I do have the mic, I might as well say something.
Uh-oh, you might be in trouble.
Yeah, you always when I speak. I just want to say thank you for putting this important information out so that we're having conversations. I have been working tirelessly trying to engage the African American community within 48197 and 48198, who I feel have been purposely excluded from information. And it's about each one, teach one. And we've got to do better. And I would raise the question for everybody to look at themselves to see what they're doing. And if you're okay with what you're doing, then you might be part of the problem of exclusion in 2020 as we see it. For an African American, we are in pain, seriously pain. But this is nothing new, what happened to George Floyd. This is an everyday occurrence in someone's life. And so—
Hey, you have a question, another question for
I don't
one of the panelists?
No, I'm just making a statement. I told you it was a mistake when I hit the button for questions. Yeah, I didn't have no question.
I want to get to some more questions as we have less time and folks are taking time away. So if you don't have a question, find you go on.
Well, my only statement is I'd like to see everybody tomorrow at my Zoom meeting. It's on the calendar, so please support and we might learn some things. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good, Thank you. So I want to also get to the other panelists, and first I want to start with Chuck and talking about COVID and what's going on with COVID. We're going to bounce back to reparations, but I do want to.
You see, I made a mistake. I said, but you opened it.
Gail, you're going to need to, let me see if I can mute you. We need to mute you. There we go. All right. Okay,
Am
so
I up?
Chuck, are you there?
I am. Can everybody hear me? And can everyone see me?
Yep, I can see you.
Cool, cool. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Washtenaw County Democratic Party for including the Health Department on today's call. In my remarks today, I'm going to give a bit of history and some history that was referred to by Dr. Watson earlier. And then I'll talk a little bit about some more recent history. And then I'll talk specifically about one of the groups that the Health Department is working with and has been working with during the COVID-19 crisis, as well as several years before. So racism is, at least in part, responsible for the fact that African Americans, since arriving as slaves, have had the worst health care, the worst health status, and the worst health outcomes of any racial or ethnic group in the United States. Many famous doctors, philosophers, and scientists of each historical era were involved in creating and perpetuating racial inferiority mythology and stereotypes. Such theories were routinely taught in US medical schools in the 18th, 19th, and first half of the 20th centuries. The conceptualization of race moved from the biological to the sociological sphere with the march of science. The atmosphere created by racial inferiority theories and stereotypes, 246 years of Black slavery, along with biased educational processes, almost inevitably led to medical and scientific abuse, unethical experimentation, and the overutilization of African Americans as subjects for teaching and training purposes, as Dr. Watson referred to earlier with African American women. From 1932 to 1972, the Public Health Service tracked about 600 low-income African American men in Tuskegee, Alabama, about 400 of whom had syphilis. The stated purpose was to better understand the natural course of the disease. To do so, the men were lied to about the study and provided sham treatments. Many needlessly passed the disease on to family members, suffered, and died. More recent history, the Medicaid program has been a lifeline for low-income Americans, pregnant people, and the elderly, and people with disabilities. It is jointly funded by states and the federal government and has been operating for 54 years. As of 2019, the program covered 68 million people, with African Americans making up about 20% of Medicaid enrollees. Because African Americans tend to be poorer than other demographic groups on average, public health insurance programs such as Medicaid are vital to ensure affordable health care and healthier outcomes. In states that have not expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, African Americans and other people of color are most likely to fall within a coverage gap, meaning they earn too much to qualify for the traditional Medicaid program, yet not enough to be eligible for premium tax credits under the market plans. Increases in health insurance coverage under the ACA have improved access to medical care and have been linked to better outcomes for African Americans, such as earlier diagnosis of treatment of certain cancers. However, disparities still exist across health conditions when comparing African Americans and whites, including maternal mortality, infant mortality, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and other health issues. Social factors including economic disadvantage, inequalities in education, and lack of access to healthcare impact a person's ability to lead a healthy and productive life. For people in American society that experience racism and inequality in their daily lives and throughout the lifespan, the impact of social factors on health are the most grave. The American health system is beset with inequalities that have disproportionate impact on people of color and other marginalized groups. These inequalities contribute to gaps in health insurance coverage, uneven access to services, and poorer health outcomes among certain populations. African Americans, yes.
So there's a question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. So there's a question asking, what is the Washtenaw Health Department doing to combat the pandemic now and for us in the future?
Well, I want to give you, it's funny, when you said Chuck, I was coming to a Washtenaw County Health Department example. So what we're doing in terms of now, we're working with our health system partners to provide testing. Many of you all on the call may know, and if you don't know, there have been community pop-up testing in various sites, particularly on the eastern side of the county in 48198 and 48197, where Professor Hodge highlighted so eloquently earlier that we've seen a disproportionate number of positive COVID cases. Those pop-up community testing have been going on, I don't know, for maybe about 4 weeks now. And as we begin to open up as a county, one particular testing that's been ongoing, it's occurred at Perry Elementary in Ypsilanti, in the city of Ypsilanti. And that testing will be ongoing through October. And so testing is one piece. But as we get ready to reopen and people begin to come out of quarantine, one of the things that we're also doing is working with the Office of Community and Economic Development to provide cloth masks for people who can't afford them or don't have access to them. I can put the contact person's name in the chat just so that folks will have that information as well.
That would be good.
Yep. And so, I mean, I can continue on. I wanted to give an example, but I know that we're short on time. And so if there are other questions that I can answer, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if I can't answer them, then I can make sure that I can get those answers within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, there are other questions, but I want to pivot to Sheriff Clayton, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So Sheriff Clayton, thank you so much for being here. Are you still with us?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So Sheriff Clayton, I know there's some issues that are going on in Washtenaw County right now, and we're going to give you an opportunity to address those. But I want to pivot back to what Dr. Watson was talking about in terms of reparations and as it relates to police policies and police violence. And so can you kind of give us a overview? I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen a lot of protests that have happened basically because of police brutality. 67 riots, Los Angeles, those sort of things. So can you kind of give us an overview of the police policies and procedures with regards to that in our community?
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having me. I'll try to be concise. So you're right. I mean, what we see manifesting today all over the country, and as the professor said, all over the world in terms of people standing up and essentially saying no more, we're not going to stand for it, is not just the result of the George Floyd murder. I think, and I've said this before, I think the spark with George Floyd is really one human being dressed in a uniform kneeling on the neck of another human being till his life expired. I think that image in and of itself is so searing, is so devastating. It really has seared an image in our mind and hearts that has motivated us. My concern is, we talked about this after Laquan McDonald, we talked about this after Eric Gardner, that those were the straws to break the camel's back. And now we're saying the same thing with George Floyd. I think this might be a little different because of that image. As it relates to policies and procedures here, I'll speak to that, but I want to take a step back and also talk about culture. So what we have tried to do for the last 12 years is really focus on the culture of the organization. There's a person that said at some point, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so you better attend to it. So we can have all the best policy, we can have all the best training, oversight, but if the culture of the organization is flawed, you're going to have flawed behavior. So we've been working on that. And what I mean by working on culture is really talking about, why do we exist? Where do we get our authority from or our legitimacy from? And it doesn't come from a mayor. It doesn't come from a city manager or a board of commissioners. It comes from the people. It's the people that decide that they're going to follow the rules, and it's the people that have decided that this group called police are the folks that help us abide by the rules. And every time we violate the trust, every time we violate that sacred oath between us and the people, we undermine our legitimacy and we undermine our relationship with the community. So we've tried to make that paramount in our organization. And I'll say this, whether it's this organization or another organization, we can do our best and we'll put everything in place, but we employ human beings. And human beings are oftentimes or sometimes going to go against the culture and go against policy and procedure, and you have to address that. You have to address it when it happens, or it's going to continue to manifest itself. So I'll circle back to Washtenaw County. People have asked a number of times, I mean, there are groups like 8 Can't Wait that laid out 8 specific things that need to be in a use of force policy to be acceptable, from de-escalation to duty to intervene to all of those things, which I think are critically important. What I would tell people here that want to know specifically to Washtenaw County is go to our website, and our subject control use of force policy is public. It's on the website. And one of the things we did when we got the 8 Can't Wait, they had these 8 questions. We went through each one of them to see, do we have that in our policy? And each one of them we have in our policy. So ban strangleholds and chokeholds, clearly articulated in our policy that is banned. The only time you can use any kind of neck restraint is in a lethal force encounter, which means the officer has to believe that either his safety, life, or the life of someone else is in jeopardy before he or she can use lethal force, and neck restraint is one of those. I'm trying to be brief and hit all the key points. The other one is required de-escalation. So de-escalation is a foundational element in our use of force policy. If you look through our policy, there are numerous references to de-escalation. And I'll give you an example. If there's an incident that goes down, I won't speak to the specific one that has happened here in Apple Ridge, but one of the things that we will look at internally in the officer's actions is, what did you do to de-escalate that situation? Not just initially, but in our policy, it says throughout the entire encounter. So if it wasn't an opportunity to de-escalate at one point, but later on in the encounter, you have an opportunity to de-escalate, then you have a responsibility. It's a mandate that you have to de-escalate. So that's really filtered and is really evaluated in our policy. Again, require warnings before shooting, clearly in our policy, that unless it is absolutely unsafe to do so, our staff's required to give a warning to someone before you engage them with a firearm. Exhaust all other means before shooting. Lethal force is the last example. I'll go back to our preamble. In our preamble, in our policy, it's not just the sanctity of the police officer's life that's important, it's the sanctity of everybody's life. You shouldn't call us to the scene, say if someone has a mental health disorder or substance use disorder, and die as a result of us arriving. So we have a responsibility to do everything that we can to keep people safe. The other question was a duty to intervene. In our policy, it's clearly established that if you're a member of our organization and you see another law enforcement officer not just do something, but if you think they're about to do something to cause someone harm and excessive force, you have a duty to intervene. So not only intervene, you have a duty to render aid. And if you saw what happened in Buffalo when those gentlemen pushed that man down and nobody rendered aid, that would be a violation of our policy. First off, the force in and of itself was inappropriate. And secondly, when that man hit the ground and you knew he was injured, you have a duty to intervene and render aid to that person right away. Real quick, no shooting for moving vehicles. So we have a ban both from shooting at a moving vehicle or shooting from a moving vehicle. We have a use of force continuum. And the last one is a requirement for reporting. And I'll say this, I was asked a question about the thin blue line. This line of protection that police have always had for each other, which I think is one of the key elements that leads to police brutality and some of the issues that we have. We have got it all twisted in our profession. Yes, if I'm your car partner and you and I are dependent on each other for our lives, you have to believe that I got your back. And I have to believe that I got your back. But that does not transcend illegal activity. It does not transcend or going, if you do something wrong, I have to have the back of the people, not the back of you because you did something wrong. So I just wanted to get that part out. And the last thing I'll say is you have the policy, but now you also have to train to the policy. So all of our training is connected to our policy. And if we violate it, then we have an obligation to clearly look at it and come down on the right side of the law and hold people accountable for their actions.
Those are really good points. I appreciate those, and I'm sure that our audience appreciates those too. One of the things that has also come up is police unions. Police unions being a detriment to being able to actually move forward. What is your thoughts on that?
So police unions exist. I believe and honor labor and the role that labor unions play in helping run organizations. But quite frankly, from a leadership standpoint, we as leaders can't hide behind the union. I can't say as the head of the organization that I can't do something because the union won't let me. Because then the question becomes, well, who runs the organization, you or the union? Now, I have to abide by the collective bargaining agreement. I have to abide by those rules. There's a process, right, in terms of a due process. So I have someone that's alleged of doing something. There's a due process to make sure that we give that person what they need to defend themselves and then be held accountable. But you can't hide behind the union and say, well, the union won't let me do that. Because if we've done that, then we have really abdicated our responsibility as leaders and turned it over to someone else. I think in today, I mean, I've seen so many unions step up here lately defending what is the indefensible. The union in Buffalo was defending the actions of the officers in Buffalo. So now it's time for the leader of that police department to step up and be willing to go to war with the union. So what we have said is, look, if it is appropriate, we will take the action that we have to, and then we'll fight it all the way through our arbitration. If the arbitrator overrules us, so be it. But we won't shy away from holding someone accountable because we're afraid to go up against the union.
Accountability is the biggest thing. I think that's what a lot of people are talking about. Let me pivot to Attorney Robin. Good morning, Attorney Robin. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Loretta, and good morning, Mama Watson, Mr. Wilson, and Sheriff Clayton. I'm honored to be here with your distinguished panel of guests.
So, Attorney Robin, I just want to ask you about the legal ramifications of reparations. I know you have a very involved part in reparations and the fact that you have talks about it, you have information about it, you've been involved in reparations as well. But talk about the legal ramifications, or are there hurdles that we may have to overcome in order for reparations to happen? What's your thoughts?
Okay, and you know, as it's in my bio, I do teach a class on law and the African American experience at EMU, and in that class, we just had a class this past term. It went from it was live to online, and we read the Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Case for Reparations.
Yes.
I also added, you know, that we covered HR 40, and so, and I was pleased to hear from Professor Watson. I call her Mama Watson, family connection. But
Yes.
so I was pleased to hear about the update, because when we covered the issue in the class, you know, and when I talked about it with amongst my friends and family, they're like, we don't need a study. We built this country.
Exactly.
It's not about a study. It's about the remedy. Okay. And, you know, what we talked about in the class is just the history of us as Black folks. I mean, I know some people want to go, because there's this book, The First Americans Were Africans, but, you know, this term I started at 1619. You know, we read Nicole Hannah-Jones, the 1619 Project, and then we're reading the Higginbotham book, where we go through the history of Black folk in America. You look at from being brought here as slaves, you know, and being raped, brutalized, mistreated, all the way up to the present. You know, you go through, we went through the Civil War, Reconstruction. We also have been reading Ben Crump's, and Ben Crump, I'm a member of the National Bar Association, and so we read Ben Crump's The Legalized Genocide of Colored People, which I would recommend to everybody. Very good for middle school, college, grad school. Everybody needs to read it. White people, I think it should be everybody. But basically what he talks about in the book is just how we as Black people, since we've been here, and Native Americans as well, or Native Americans, Indigenous, Black folk too, we have been brutalized since we were brought here as slaves. And so it's no surprise, he talks about how with police brutality and misconduct, how that's the slow genocide. At that time that he wrote the book before all of this happened, that's the slow genocide. And then he talks about the disparities in education, healthcare, housing, and employment. And for me as an attorney, I do indigent defense in Detroit right now. And I've represented children for 12 and a half years as an advocate. So I've been actually in the trenches directly seeing, and as myself, I'm African-American myself. I'm born and raised in Ann Arbor.
Right.
Went to private school, Catholic school here, but grew up in Ypsilanti. My parents made sure I was taking African classes, dances, camp, all of that. And so I've been a Black person. I've been stopped by the police myself. That's what prompted me to start doing workshops. And I pulled in Sheriff Clayton to do on what to do when stopped by the police. I was upset. Here in Washtenaw County, you have Ora Rosser, a Black woman, 40, shot in the head and killed. And I know that was not the sheriff. That was the Ann Arbor Police Department. But I think the problem here, you've got, I know the question that you had started with this topic is about COVID, and it's the effect of COVID, and does that give us a better case for reparations? Yes, I would say we had a good case before, but even more so, it's as they say in scripture, what's done in the dark has come to light. And what COVID is doing is it's just like when I've had clients that have told me they've been brutalized by the police, but they didn't have any proof. It was their word against the police. Now you've got technology. But what the problem before COVID is, even with the technology, even when Ben Crump, Lee Merritt, Chris Stewart, our warrior lawyers who've been doing these police misconduct cases, even when they were taking them to court, you still, Philando Castile, you had predominantly white jurors that they're basically seeing Black people being lynched in our society. George Floyd, that's a lynching. And it's like, yeah, we've been desensitized to it. It's like, but the COVID has forced everybody to kind of slow things down and really focus on what's happening. And, and I've been doing work, like videos talking about, for people who want to protest, they can protest. If they want to, some people want to get out there, some people want to stay at home. We all have our work to do in this situation. But in answer to your question about reparations, the legal implications, I know that with the NBA, the National Bar Association, that's the Black lawyers, the national group started in 1925 because they wouldn't let us into the ABA, which is the white, it's all Black. It's not all Black. It's all mixed now. You can be a part of the ABA, but the NBA was for Black attorneys, and Charles Ogletree and Johnny Cochran and Willie Gary, who is the wealthiest Black lawyer in the nation, they had come together and they were talking about bringing a lawsuit. And, but Johnny Cochran passed away. And so I know that with the National Bar, there has been, we have brought that issue up before, and we have a conference coming up. We're going to be bringing that up again. But I think pressure needs to come, yes, we as lawyers, we do our part, but it needs to come from all sides in order to get reparations. I mean, it shouldn't be, Professor Watson, she said that, that the remedy is there. So it's like, it's incumbent on us to vote the right people in there. Get rid of I was talking about, because I'm the vice chair for the Michigan Democratic Women's Caucus, and I'm also a member of the Southwestern Wayne Democratic Club. And I'm looking on social media, and you see Ron Paul, there's anti-lynching legislation that's going on now, and he's trying to hold it up. And I'm like, Ron Paul needs to go. When I say he needs to go, he needs to resign. We need to protest. Well, I know Breonna Taylor, they're protesting there now, but he needs to be gone. They're getting rid of Confederate statutes, but we have Confederate senators right now who are in our U.S. Senate who are just an abomination. And it's like, I think, you look at the history of us as Black people, and you see just the whole cycles. We have good times, bad times. We have good cases for us. We have bad cases against us. Just depends on who's on the bench. But you look at our history, and this is just an abomination. And I when I was in law school, I lived in South Africa, and I took a class on constitutionalism in South Africa. And when I studied about that, you look at apartheid in South Africa, America has an apartheid. And what the difference I would say about now compared to before the 60s is that we have more allies. We have more white people around in the Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, people here and people internationally who are looking at this and they're like, oh, this is a reset. This is Ben Crump talks about the reset. We're 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. They were supposed to be the reset for Black folks. But then you had the racists come back in with Jim Crow and the Black codes. And so, but it's like, no, we got to reset right now. You know, they came in and they took the stuff away, but now we got to reset because you got more white people, white children who protest and who are like, this is wrong. And so that's why we've got to all make sure we vote and that we vote for the progressive candidates, that not just people gonna talk trash, because I know there are concerns about the Democratic Party, but you got to actions speak louder than words. You know, when I wanted to start doing what to do and stop by the police, I called Sheriff Clayton up. I said, we need to start doing these programs. He had a card that he had put together. We went around, their videos are out there. You know, I have a Robin Legal, it's Robin with a Y. The videos are there. I have a Saving Lives video. It shows the work that's been done. I've done programs in Washtenaw County, Wayne County, Saginaw. Jerry knows we're going to be doing, I've reached out to him about doing another program about this issue because it's an abomination. When you see what happened to George Floyd, it's unacceptable. Okay, I'm going to let you, I talk.
No, okay, I just want to mention to the, to the panel, to the attendees, that if you guys also have questions, I have questions for the panelists, but if you guys have questions too, please raise your hand. And there are some questions in the chat that I want to get to as well. Hang on, Crystal Rose has a question. Let me get to her. So hang on just a second, Crystal Rose. Thank you guys for your patience. As was said, this is my first time doing this as you're
doing a great job.
So
yeah, this is great.
Thank you. All right, Crystal. Okay, let me see. There we go. Crystal, how to get you? You're supposed to go to the top. Satish and Eli, I need some help here. I'm trying to get her to the top.
Okay, so just you can unmute her.
Okay, so let me find.
And
She should be.
or you can make her panelist if you want her to be seen as well.
Okay. There she is. Okay, I got her. All right, Crystal, you're live now. You can talk. What do you have to say?
So I actually typed my question in the chat, but I'm gonna go ahead and read it out. For those of y'all who don't know me, I'm like the vice chair for the outreach committee, but I'm also a combat veteran. So this past Friday, I was at a protest outside the sheriff's department. And during that time, there was an individual on the roof with gear on that was slightly unnerving. So I was triggered in that moment, and I wanted to know after that, what does trauma-informed mean to the sheriff's department, and how is that actually applied to policing here in Washtenaw County and engagement with people in the community?
I think I'm unmuted. That's a great question. So first to what happened at the protest. So we assigned a liaison to make sure we had continual contact with the protest organizers. And we tried to make something really, really clear. Look, we're here to support you. We're here to do everything we can to provide the space for you to peacefully protest. We understand that your First Amendment right of free speech and protest is grounded in our country. It's foundational. And we're talking about change. Change happens, as we see now, for the people rising up and saying, look, we don't agree with what government does. So we tried to make it really clear we want to do whatever we can, provide tents, provide space, do whatever we can. We were getting a lot of information from the federal government that there were infiltrators who were trying to come into the different spaces of protest, and they were putting people at risk. We were getting this, and if you recall, that incident occurred, I think, right before all the other incidents were occurring across the country that was really causing violence. Now, I didn't know this, but the tactical team, which is made up of a number of different departments, made a decision to put people on the roof for observation. Let's see, because we had information of certain groups coming in. We know who they are. So let's see who they are. Let's see if they're in the group. So now we can track them, not the peaceful protesters, but the folks that we felt were going to disrupt things and put everybody at risk. Now they are police officers, and the police officer mentality is I got to take my tools with me, which for them are their long guns. So immediately after we found out they were on the roof, because I found out from Derek Jackson, we immediately pulled them off because I didn't know they were there. And I'll just give you another example of why we tried to do that. The example is when the march went into the intersection. We made it really clear, don't stop the march in the intersection, give the people the space to do what they need to do, block off the streets a couple blocks up ahead and redirect traffic, because what we didn't want to have happen is one of the protesters get hit by a car. So that really was our mindset. In response to understanding trauma, we talk a lot about trauma informed. We talk to our staff about trauma informed. We actually apply that as it pertains to our young folks. So we have this concept that's called program called Handle with Care. So if our deputies respond to a call for service and there's disruption in the household and there's a child in the household, we fill out a card and send it to that prospective school. We don't give any information other than telling that teacher, well, we tell the school and the principal, so they can tell that teacher that that child coming into class experienced trauma the night before. So the behavior you may see from that young person, it might not be intentional. They're not trying to be disruptive, but that child in and of itself is in trauma. And the last example I'll give you is we started a group called Sure Moms. So Sure Moms is a trauma-informed group for mothers in our community whose children are in the juvenile justice system. And what we were seeing is this cycle. The kids would go into the system, they get treatment, they seem stabilized, and then they go right back into a household that's trauma-filled. And when we started talking to the moms started to recognize their own trauma. So Sure Moms creates a space for moms that are in trauma to work through their trauma so they're in a better position to support their children. So we have a long way to go in terms of how and let me add this, here's what we're not real good at. And we recognize that we're trying to put this in place. We're not real good at recognizing our own trauma, which quite frankly feeds in to sometimes the behavior that we exhibit when we're making contact with people. So we have some awareness, we're trying some things, but admittedly, we have a ways to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's a couple more questions, but I want to ask, I got a question for Professor Watson. Are you still with us, Professor Watson? We didn't get rid of her, did we? Okay, this question can actually go to everyone on the panel, on the panelists. Okay, so there's a book called White Rage, all right, by Carolyn Anderson, and in it she talks about how white people don't like the idea of Blacks succeeding, which is an impediment to reparations and impediment to our ability to make changes, legislative changes and things like that. And so not that that's, you know, I mean, this is one person's opinion, but if you look at our history, for example, the biggest example is the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation, the massacre of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we can go down the line. What are your thoughts to that? How do we, in terms of reparations, how do we bring those people along so that we can make this, bring this to fruition? I'll start with you, Chuck. You got to unmute.
Yeah, I see that. I think that's a great question. I've read a book, and many of you all on the call are probably familiar with this book, and it really changed the way that I now see racism in this country. And the book is called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And what she does is that she talks about, and she says very, very candidly that this book is written for white people, of which Ms. DiAngelo is also white. And she talks about the various historical perspectives that outline that racism is a construct and that it was intentional. And the thing about something that's a construct, it also means that it can be deconstructed.
Mhm.
And so I would highly recommend that book, particularly for white people who want to know what they can do, getting the historical perspective of how racism was instituted during Reconstruction, how it affected education and the disproportionate number of resources allocated to white students and African American students. I think that history is always a place where you should start in order to make sure that whatever you're arguing for or whatever stance that you're taking is based in facts. And I think that Ms. D'Angelo does a really good job, particularly in the early part of her book, laying down that historical foundation.
I read that book. I agree with you. Okay. What about you, Sheriff? You got to unmute.
So I apologize just briefly. I was typing back to Crystal as you were asking your question. So if you would just do me the favor of just repeating real quick.
Yeah, no. So there's several books out about reparations and about how we should move towards this. And one of the things that Attorney Robin mentioned, and also Professor Watson mentioned, was that we got to bring everybody along. Well, the questions have been posed as, why are white people so upset with us? Why is it that we have such a problem with that? And so in her book, in Carol Anderson's book, White Rage, she talks about the fact that they just don't want to see us succeed. And when you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, I mean, that was senseless. We were, so what are your thoughts in terms of that? How do we make that happen from your perspective?
So I think part of it, I think there are a couple of things at play here. There's the historical perspective, right? I think for lots of white people, they don't know the history. So they know this thing called slavery. They know this thing called Jim Crow, emancipation. They know all of that civil rights movement, but they don't know the history. They don't know where it comes from. And the other thing, and this is what I found as I used to teach bias-based police classes to police. When you're teaching classes like that, when you're having those discussions, people immediately internalize it and make it personal. So they make it personal and they think that we are saying they themselves in this time, in this space, they're the ones that are bad. So then everybody gets in defensive posture and they can't hear what we're saying in terms of the impact, the trauma, and the fact that for us to move as a country, we all have to move, including African Americans. So I think we have to challenge, educate, and bring folks along. And as they start to personalize it, depersonalize it. And the last thing I'll say, and this is connected to police reform. Police reform cannot occur unless there's societal reform. We have to challenge and change the culture of society. And we have to illustrate to and educate folks that for all this time, Black has been shown as being evil. Black has been shown as being the face of crime. So think about this. If I've learned throughout my life that Black is shown as being bad, then it's going to be hard for me to believe that they deserve anything good. So if you are the face of evil, it's your fault these bad things are happening, then how am I going to come around and agree that you need to have reparations or anything else that is positive? So I think we have to start challenging societal's basic assumptions about who we are, the role that we have played in building this country, and the fact that we play a central role in this country and in this world if we're ever going to get to the place that we all say we want to be, right? So this nation that we all desire to have, we'll never have it unless African Americans are on, first off, we have acknowledged what has happened to us. And secondly, and I've always said this, I don't need you to do anything for me. I need you to make sure that not only equity, but equitable treatment. So I think it's all of those things. I don't think it's just one simple answer. It's complicated. But in this time, in this space, George Floyd, here's what I believe. I think for maybe the first time, white people actually hear us.
Yes.
So when you see white people say Black Lives Matter,
yes,
really gives me a little bit, just a little bit
Yeah.
of optimism that they actually hear us. And I
Yeah.
think that's important.
I hear what you're saying. I'm gonna let you speak. Reverend Sharpton said it really well in his eulogy when he talked about get off our neck. Go ahead, Attorney Robin.
Yes, on that question of how do we bring other folk along, my first reaction is I think of Harriet Tubman I don't know if y'all studied about Harriet Tubman or saw the movie. I know some people had some issues about the accuracy of some things, but like liberation is a moving train, and if you're not on the train, you're gonna get left behind. I mean, in the class we talked about the Civil War, and you had the North and the South, and we saw what happened there. So it's like this is. And the difference is from Civil War to the civil rights and the riots of the situations of the 60s. The difference is you have more people who have the right mindset. So I would say it's incumbent on the courts as well, because our system, like when you talk about, you reference the author, White Rage, and having this problem with Black people succeeding, it makes me think of our president. Our president, it's like racism is such a sickness and illness in him that he would rather hurt himself. It's like our country. We have our country hurt than for us. Like when he was looking at Barack Obama and going forward for Black people to succeed, it makes him physically ill. And the problem is with him being our president. He would rather have our system go into a civil war and have police, go and assault, beat its citizens, kill its citizens, than just fix the problem, cure the problem of racism. So what I would say about bringing people along, progress is coming, and if you don't make the right choices. This is a moving train. Liberation is going to come. It's just, is it going to be dirty and nasty, or is it going to be pretty? Is it better, like South Africa?
Exactly. Monica has a question for you, Robin, but I want to pivot to Professor Watson first and have her answer that question. Professor Watson, I don't know why you keep becoming an attendee when you're a panelist. You've been promoted, so I don't know why that keeps happening. So. Anyway, did you hear the question?
I did. I did hear the question, and I believe I think it's spiritual. And I'm not just saying that because I happen to be a pastor of a Westside Unity in Detroit. I believe that holistically, the truth is we are one. So it was not this business of having a separation by race has always been artificial because we're one people. All human life began in Africa. Come on now. All human life began in the continent of Africa. So the truth is everybody is of African descent, including people who think there's something else.
That's right.
I love to tell European audiences that I'm your mother.
I agree.
It's not just my baby, Attorney Robin McCoy, who calls me Mama Watson.
That's right. That's
I
right.
got 20 godchildren. But we are the mothers and fathers of the human race. And all life began in that. So the truth is, when we go inside of ourselves, and I happen to believe, for those persons who are persons of faith, that the God is not just up in the sky, God is within us. The Spirit of the Lord is in us. The presence of the Lord is in us. And the power of the Lord is in us. So when we go within and get in touch with our real selves, that self that is not based on what people can see and touch, but that part of us, that consciousness that connects us with the real power, it overcomes and supersedes anything that looks like a difference. Because we're one. We are one. And it takes some work to get to that. It takes some work.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. And I believe that there's a significant spirit of the Lord moving in young people of all backgrounds right now.
Yeah.
You would not have people demonstrating all over the world in the Upper Peninsula. Come on now.
Yeah, talking about Black Lives Matter. Look what
Right.
happened in D.C.
You would not have that happen in Macomb County,
Yes.
places where people of color are not represented. It's because there's something within,
Yes.
within that is connecting and helping people see the humanity of everybody.
Okay, Miss Monica, Monica, you're on. You can talk. Did you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, hi. It's going to be a two-part question. So I'll make it very quick. Mother Watson, and this is for Mother Watson, and this is also for Attorney Robin McCoy. The first question is for obviously Mother Watson. Can you connect basically the regressions, and how does that play today as it relates to the struggle of African American people and people of color inside of the environment and systems that we have now, particularly when I talk about regressions, I wanted to go back to even things like how the retirees in the city of Detroit, basically who got their retirement cut in half and their benefits slashed. And most of those retirees were people of African descent and people of color. How does that relate to the environment that we have today with, might as well say, a rise of racial angst inside of not only these communities across the United States, but even here locally. And then for Attorney Robin McCoy, I wanted to basically ask you a question in regards to Reconstruction and how it is that during the period of Reconstruction, people of color, particularly African Americans, were making gains inside of not only a business, but also our political system, and how all that was basically transcended back through the actions post-Reconstruction, and how that plays into the environment today. Thank you.
Okay, can you guys make those answers quick? Okay, yeah, thank you.
I'll defer to Mama Watson first.
I think, first of all, everything that happened with the so-called bankruptcy of Detroit, including the theft, the grand theft of the pension from retirees, which impacted my pension. I worked 10 years for the city as a hardworking council member who passed 20,000 laws during my tenure. And my pension was drastically cut. A disgrace. This is to a woman who I gave up my health care during my tenure. I refused to take health care because I said Blue Cross Blue Shield was overcharging the city. $300 million a year was an annual budget for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, because I'm basically healthy, I don't eat pork and don't drink and don't, do some other things. So I'm healthy, and only went for an annual physical. So as a result, the money they were paying for my health care was as much as they were paying for my salary, and I thought it was outrageous. But so anyway, it's grand theft what's happening, and that bankruptcy was never approved by the mayor or the city council. I went to the court during the trial and testified before Judge Rhodes and told him, I said, this whole business of the bankruptcy trial should not have been, because the bankruptcy order was written by Kevin Orr, who was an appointee of Governor Snyder, who appointed him to do the bankruptcy. That's why he was appointed. He did the bankruptcy for Chrysler. So everything was illegal. Everything was, including the takeaway, the grand theft of the pension from the retirees. All of it was illegal, and they got away with it. And let me tell you that Judge Rhodes went to work for the law firm Jones Day that Kevin Orr came from, and went straight away and started consulting on the bankruptcy of Puerto Rico. And then he came back to Detroit and became an emergency manager for the Detroit Public Schools. So it was a conspiracy. All of it was conspired, and all of it was illegal. Because this is a black city, they got away with it. This is mob lynching of the city of Detroit because of its blackness and its empowerment. And they declared that they wanted to take over this city, and they did it because they could.
Professor Watson, thank you for that. So there's a couple more questions that I'm gonna let Morgan, I'm gonna turn you on in just a second as soon as I can get there. 1 minute, and sorry. Where are you? You are under the panelists view list. Okay. Morgan, where'd you go? I see. Okay, while I'm waiting to find her. Oh, there she is. Okay, Morgan, are you there? Morgan? Okay, I guess she dropped off. All right, so I wanted to go back to Sheriff Clayton and ask him another question here, and it has to do with about the prisoners and COVID. What are you guys doing about the prison population and COVID? You got to unmute.
Got it. So a couple of things really quick. So Washtenaw County, as most of you know, we're about 360,000 people in the county. Our county jail is rated capacity of 402, which when you look at it from a per capita standpoint, is a very small jail. And I've argued that it needs to stay a small jail, that we should never build a bigger jail, because if you build it, we'll fill it. And also I've argued that even with 400 some odd people, a significant percentage of those individuals aren't a risk to the community and shouldn't be in jail. And what we've seen in COVID is that's really manifested itself. So our average daily population last year was 365 individuals, incarcerated individuals. We now stand at 150 individuals in our jail. We work with the courts. We identified individuals that were low risk, underlying conditions with health, age, everything, generated that list, sent it to the court, work with the courts, the prosecutor's office, Safe House, and others to get those folks out of jail. So that was the first key. We know that COVID thrives in densely populated areas. There's no more densely populated facility than a jail or a prison. So we knew we had to get as many people out, and then we could practice some of the physical distancing. So we started doing that. We were really good partners with Chuck and his colleagues at Public Health. We followed public health guidelines, and everything they were talking that should happen out in public, we attempted to replicate here. We gave incarcerated individuals masks. We increased the cleaning. We made sure they had soap and water. So a lot of people talking about hand sanitizer. Remember, hand sanitizer is good if you don't have soap and water. Soap and water is first. So we made sure they had soap and water. We had our medical folks, along with our staff, go to all of our living areas and educate the population on COVID, what it is, what it isn't, what physical distancing means, all of those things. We restricted access into the jail, so bringing people into the jail. We started doing testing as we needed to do testing. If you go to our website now, we have 2 tabs. They're both COVID tabs. And the public can see everybody that's in our jail, our general population, precautionary observation, people that are suspected in quarantine, isolation. And we thought that was really important, because I was getting a lot of calls from the community saying that they were worried about their loved ones. Because we had to restrict visiting, which we knew was impactful, we increased the phone calls people could make at no cost. We increased, we bought everybody portable radios. And you said, well, what does that got to do with COVID? I think it has everything to do with it, because we know from a societal standpoint, COVID is, we're talking about trauma. COVID in and of itself causes trauma. And now you're in a isolated place and you're worried about getting infected. So we're trying to do things to keep people, their minds occupied, all of those type of things. We tested all of our staff. And if you had any symptoms, you couldn't come to work. So we tried to do everything we could to mitigate the risk. So to date, we had a total of 8 individuals that were in our jail that had COVID. All of them had released. Knock on wood right now, we haven't had a person that's been infected in well over a month. None of our staff in the jail staff have been infected. And we've had folks from the a number of different national organizations ask us, how do we actually manage a jail environment and keeping that COVID below the rates that you would see in the community itself. So our staff did a great job, but I gotta say our biggest partner was public health. Their ability to educate us and to walk us through situations that we didn't know about really was really good in terms of helping us put the right protocols in place to keep infection down. And why it was so important, not just for the jail population, all those people that are in jail are going back out in the community. So if we failed to manage it in the jail, all we were going to do is further jeopardize the community because they would be getting out and then infecting their loved ones when they left. And the last thing, when we had people that were infected that we got out of jail, we made sure that they had somewhere to go. Not just somewhere to sleep on somebody's couch, somewhere to go where they could go through their quarantine in a safe manner.
Awesome. Chuck?
If I could
go ahead.
respond to Monica's question, I know she had asked about Reconstruction and the gains that Blacks had made in as far as business, political, social structure, and then how we've had a resurgence, and then there's a regression, Jim Crow, Black Code. We had civil rights, and then we had, in the 70s, the Michelle Alexander talks about it in the new Jim Crow. They bring in the drugs, they pump the drugs in our community to further implement the conditions of the prison industrial complex. So I would say we make progress, and then there's regression because it's all by design. This is a system that's based on white supremacy. So the system is broken, and I think that we need a spiritual revolution in order to fix America. I mean, that's what had to happen in South Africa. They had apartheid, and it happened. You had forces within South Africa and international forces. You know, I know Ben Crump has talked about us taking this to United Nations. I know Malcolm X had said that before, but I think it's going to be, we have to internally, we all have to, collectively, people who are on the same page have to come together collectively and externally, like we're seeing it with the protests, the marching, all of that, prayer, meditation. We have to have a collective, we have to, like, you envision it in your mind, and then it will manifest, because that's what it happened in South Africa. So it's possible. It's just that we all have to be on the same page.
I agree. Good job. Chuck, I wanted to get your take on the Washtenaw County's Health Department. If you could just elaborate on what Sheriff Clayton said about the jail system and COVID, and what you guys are doing.
Well, as many of you all know, at the Health Department, we've made a concerted effort to address our disease management response has focused on long-term care facilities, and of which the jail is considered under that umbrella. And I think that we've been able to address that, and there's science behind why we prioritized those types of facilities. But I think that it would be unfair for me to talk about that without talking about the higher cases that occurred on the eastern side of the county, and in terms of prioritization. And one of the things that, the majority of the decisions that we've made, Loretta, have been based on the information that we had at the time. And often what happens is that when you get more information, you realize, okay, looking back in retrospect, maybe we could have done some things differently. Part of our response since realizing since rethinking some of our strategies has been to ensure that we are addressing community members who have lived experience, in this particular case, COVID-19 experience. We have a group of folks that are, where there's a group of health department staff, as well as folks that represent areas in our county that have had poorer health outcomes. We have a group that's called Community Voices, and that group was in existence prior to COVID-19, but it's important that we engage community members with lived experience. And I think going forward, we know that ensuring that we have not only their input, but more importantly, collaborating with them, especially in terms of messaging. So when we decided that, or when we started pushing out messages regarding social distancing and things of that nature, one of the things that we quickly realized was that there are a large portion of the people that we serve in our community where social distancing isn't easy because they rely on other community residents. They rely on their community to get their needs met. And so while we have had focus on long-term care facilities, and for good reason, given the science that we know around COVID-19, I think we've also learned a valuable lesson in terms of community engagement and what that looks like during a pandemic or any type of situation in which the most vulnerable people in our community could potentially be further harmed.
Mm. Okay, I'm going to bring on Monica. She has another question. I'm not sure who it's for, but after that, Professor Watson and Attorney Robin, one of the things too that we want to discuss, there's a book called the Compliance, hang on, Color of Compliance by Jerry Tamar Tisby, and he talks about the church's compliance with racism. There's a history of that. And so my question to both of you is, how do we bring them along too? Because you mentioned about this being a spiritual thing, so that the history of that we need to talk about as well. Let me get Monica on for you guys so she can have her question. Just 1 second. Again, I'm getting a little better at this. Okay, Monica, you're on again. Did you have a question?
I don't have another question, so maybe if someone else does, I just wanted to say thank Mother Watson and also Attorney McCoy for answering my questions. So thank you.
You're welcome, baby. I do have I need to give a bit of a response to what she asked about Reconstruction. And then I'll get to the other piece you mentioned, Loretta.
Okay.
The Reconstruction period was 1863 to 1877. And Johnson, Vice President Johnson, who ascended to the presidency after President Lincoln was assassinated, did not support Reconstruction. Reconstruction was dismantled, and the significance of the United States, the federal government pulling back all the troops that had been assigned to protect the newly freed Africans led to the foundation of the Ku Klux Klan, who engaged in a reign of terror and white supremacy. The same kind of white supremacy and violence is still happening all over America today.
Yes.
This reign of terror had them murder our people, including one freedman who had been an elected official, got murdered by the Klan. There was no consequence, no recompense. There was no place for people to go when this reign of terror was going on. So the Reconstruction, now mind you, what most whites or blacks don't know is that during that period, there was reparations given to the Confederates who fought the Union Army.
That's right.
They were given the Homestead Act, which granted land for white males who moved west. That was, and they also got monetary payment to compensate them for their losses. So it is not understood at all, nor is it properly recorded in the history books, social studies books in this country, that the folks who fought the Union Army, and of course, African men who had been enslaved, became a part of the Union Army at the behest of Frederick Douglass, who personally negotiated black men being involved in the Civil War. So the truth is, the Union Army was losing until black men became engaged in the Civil War, and even black women like Harriet Tubman, who was a scout for the Union Army. So the whole notion that there ought to be a real holistic view of why the Reconstruction did not succeed, because the people who were at the highest points of authority in this country were committed to white supremacy and committed to not exercising the full empowerment of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And the church was complacent in that too. Right?
Yes, the church was the oldest black church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I'm a fifth generation AME. Richard Allen had to leave the white church because they would not allow him to take communion. Refused to allow him to take communion. He was an ordained minister, but was refused communion by his white associates in the church. So he started the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and he deliberately named it African, not colored, African Methodist Episcopal, and set up the AME Church, and soon followed by black churches all over that got started. But that AME Church, and you need to look at the fact that the Ku Klux Klan used as its symbol a cross.
Yes.
Everybody knows what the cross is supposed to represent. So that's a rebuke of Christian principles, and that truly is a mocking of the principles represented by Jesus Christ, to have a cross burnings used as a symbol for the racist, murderous Klan. So the church and many church members today shroud their white supremacy and their racism under the umbrella of a professed faith, which is not in alignment nor in harmony with the true empowerment of who we really are as people, as God's people.
And so how do we get them? Oh, go ahead, Robin.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So the question was about how do we bring them along as far as the church? I know the earlier question had been about white folks. I think it's education is the key. You know, like I said, I teach a class. I know Professor Watson teaches as well. I teach a class on law and the African American experience, and we start from 1619 and we go all the way up through the present. We talked about the Reconstruction, and we talk about Ben Crump's book, the legalized, I can't say this enough, the legalized genocide of colored people. No, he did not. He's not paying me to do this. This is just, I'm a book person, and this is an amazing book. I feel like he talks about the reset, and in the spiritual community, we talk about the reset. Like, I attended Unity Church. I was baptized AME though, AME Pentecostal Catholic. My parents wanted to make sure I was covered on all bases. But it's like education. What is the solution? Education. If we educate people, just like with the police, you look at the historical context about slave catchers, what slave catchers did with black people, and now you got some people in the police departments. They had an FBI. It was a report that said that right now we have KKK people who have infiltrated the police departments, and so. Yeah. It's incumbent. Those people have got to be weeded out. But generally, with the police, the construct, they need to. Like, I saw that. I don't know if you guys saw that video of the older white man who was 75. The one I know Jerry talked about earlier in New Buffalo. And so, as far as the police, they need to be retrained, reconditioned, reprogrammed, because I know there's measures underway, because it's like the police is. Right now we have in America, the police is militarized, and not only to go against external enemies, but also right now it's being militarized against its own people, and that's not acceptable. We need a spiritual revolution and education. I like repetition, so Catholic school. Education, 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 that is the key for all of us to achieve liberation.
Okay, Robin, but Attorney Robin, if we're having these classes, you're teaching a class, what is the demographics of your class? Are there whites in your class? Are you teaching white people?
My class was the last few terms has been majority African American females.
Okay.
We've had some white folks too. Everybody needs education. I'm sorry.
How do we get them into these classes? Professor Watson, and how do we get them into these classes? And Sheriff, how do we educate, you guys are in different industries. How are you educating white people on these issues? Because that's the important thing. I mean, we already know. We already know history.
There are some very conscious, very well trained Europeans, people who are white, who need to assign themselves to educate and bring along other whites. It's not the job of black people to bring white folk up to speed. There are enough black folks who are filled with self-hatred and internalized oppression. There are enough Black people who are filled with self-hatred and internalized oppression for us to spend a lot of time bringing our own people up.
Okay.
But Europeans need to help other Europeans own and embrace their responsibility and accountability for moving beyond the hatred and the violence and the white supremacist doctrines that have permeated this country for 400 years.
I agree.
Right, I agree as well. I mean, because it's like that's the issue too with us, with the protest and the rallying. And you know, in the 60s, you had some white folks. Now you got more white folks. Black folks, we got the COVID, and we have comorbidities and all of that. And so it's like, I'm like, it's we all have a part, but I'm like, it's time for white folks to get out there, educate other white folks, and tell the white president, you know, fix this broken system.
But is it just a matter of telling? Are there other things that we could do? Like, for example, there's legislation that we should be passing in order to make this happen. I mean,
we have to do it all. It can't be one thing. We have to do it all. So we need to pass HR 40. We need everybody who's watching and listening right now, make sure you get 26 more people so that to sign on to HR 40 so that we can have the 150 necessary for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to put it on the House table for a vote. We need more people to support Senate Bill 1083.
Would that make a difference? If we got up to 150 people with this administration and this with this House and Senate, will that make a difference for HR 40, or should we be waiting? What is the strategy?
We should not wait. This is a critical time. Look at what's happening around this country. We've been waiting how long? Dr. King used to say, how long?
Right.
We waited long enough. The HR 40 was first introduced in 1989.
Yes.
It's 2020. It's time. It's time.
Right, I agree.
It's time. And there's a legal precedent set. Reparations have been paid to other groups. And we don't have to wait, and we don't need any more studies. We don't need any more analyses. America needs to do the right thing because it has blood on its hands.
But what is HR 40?
Loretta, I would say as well, like, it's just like when we have a criminal case and it's set for trial, and you're set for trial, but you're negotiating all the way up until the time of trial. If it works itself out, that's great. But I think it's like, we have to come from all sides. We have the legislation, we have the protests, rallies, prayer, meditation, collective consciousness, and you know, all of the above to force the system to change. I mean, South Africa, you had pressure. You had Nelson Mandela. He had been in prison for 27 years. You had agitation for internally and externally, and then finally there was an awakening where, you know, where South Africa, where apartheid ended. Now we know South Africa still has some things to do, but it's a lot further ahead in terms of liberation than we presently are in America.
So if we do get the 150, I just want to state that again, we get 150 people signed on, then what happens, Professor Watson? What happens with HR 40? And if
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has committed to bringing it out of committee for the first time onto the floor of the United States House of Representatives for a vigorous debate. And once that happens, we will also signal everybody who's been waiting for HR 40 to be dealt with in the House of Representatives to get busy with Senate Bill 1083 introduced by Cory Booker. Some of the people who will ultimately support it, it will not be because they've been lifelong liberals or lifelong red, black, and green accommodators. They will be led to do that by the momentum of the people. There's a momentum now saying we can't go back. We're not going back to those old days. We're not going back. We're going forward. This is a forward movement, and the surge that is presently underway will push people into the victory circle for reparations.
So if I can just add on, I think the other part, so I agree with everything Dr. Watson, Attorney McCoy is saying. The other piece, and we are the Washington Democratic Party, the other part is we have to vote. You have
That's
to
right.
get the right people in office. So we're talking about healthcare. How did healthcare occur? Because we had the right person as president. We controlled the House and we controlled the Senate. So the House bill can pass the House, and we know what's standing in front of us after that. Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate. So we must change the majority in the Senate. We must get the person that's sitting in the White House out now and replace him with Biden. And the other thing, once we get them in office, then we have to hold them accountable to do what we said we're going to do. And let's not sleep on the fact that we are impacted by local government. So the Republicans, whether we want to agree or not, we can highlight their hypocrisy all day long, but they executed the plan. And the plan was to control from local through state through federal.
Yes.
And let's not fall asleep on that. We have to control all levels of government to move what we know is the right thing to move in this country.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, well said.
And how is that done? One is voting. What else? I mean, voting locally, voting in the upcoming primary, and in the general. What are we doing? What's the strategy here?
I mean, I think, you know, like locally, you have candidates here in Washtenaw County that are running for prosecutor. And so it's like you want to make sure that you, with the candidates that you're saying, what are you going to do for Black people? Like, what are you doing for Black people now? You have people that are running, you know, there are people that are running for state rep, state senate. There are people that are running for judge, you know, with the, you know, what we're dealing with. And I spent a lot of time doing work in Detroit. We had in the Wayne County Jail, we had two deputy, we had Donna Fay, the commander, he died. Another officer died. You had two doctors that died.
Wow.
You know, we've been actively working with the criminal defense bar to try to file motions to get our clients out. I know Sheriff Napoleon and the chief judge, they did let certain people out, but the conditions in the jail are still substandard, subpar. They were that way before. And there were some people, prosecutors and judges, that didn't care. And now COVID is forcing them to care. But like when you look at these races, like the judicial races here in Washtenaw County, you've got Arrayne Washington. I mean, and this is, you know, she's been practicing 27 years. She is more than qualified. It's a no-brainer. You know, it makes me think when you hear 27 too, Breonna Taylor turned 27 yesterday. It's like, how long do we have to wait for progress to occur? We don't even, you know, right now on the Washtenaw County bench, we don't have any Blacks. We don't have any Black judges in a county that, you know, some stats say 12%, some of them say 14%. I know we have the census. That's another thing. We need to vote. We need to make sure we're counted in the census. And we need to gravitate towards the candidates, the people who not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Like Sheriff Clayton is walking the walk. He's not somebody that's just, you know, just from what I know, he's not out there just talking, because you got some people that are just talking heads. They talk real nice but they're not doing anything. And so you want to have people that are actually doing the work that needs to be done. Like we did yesterday, we did a panel on expungements and federal pardons, and we had a coalition that came together. We had Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She came out, and we had Jeff Irwin, who was talking about the expungement legislation, Ronnie Peterson, state rep, you know, Nick Ramel, who's running for judge, and Arrayne Washington. So it's like people, you know, we talk about when Biden gets in, but we need justice now. We don't, you know, put pressure on our local, state, and national officials. You know, we wrote a letter, and it was interesting. We wrote a letter for asking for the release of Kwame Kilpatrick for him, because 28 years is too long. And also for all non-violent offenders that are in the federal system. The pressure needs, you know, and I put it on my Facebook, we need to put the pressure on the officials now for change. Equity and justice demand that change happens now, not we wait pie in the sky, but right now.
So if I could add just one more piece, I'm sorry, Laura.
Yes, no, go ahead.
We were talking about people running for office. So here's the other piece. So the challenge for us, we have to pay attention. So not just the platitudes, right? Not just people that are going to pander to what they think we want to hear. So I don't just want to hear folks talk about, well, we're going to divert people from the jail, or we're going to let people go, or we're not going to. I want to know your plan. So if you can't stand in front of me and tell me, here's my plan for when I get into office, some concrete things that you're going to do that after you get in office, then I can go back and hold you to it. That's not enough. It's not enough for you just to go, look, people know what we want to hear. It's not enough for you just to talk in generalities. I want you to lay out for me exactly what you're going to do. And if you can't do that, then I have to question whether you have the competence to carry out what you're promising me. I think that's extremely important. And to this point, I hear a whole bunch of stuff that makes me feel happy, but I haven't heard a lot that I said, well, okay, that's a concrete plan. There's a strategy there that a person that understands the system and their plan fits, or their plan is challenging the system. Because if we're talking about blowing up the status quo, then you have to have a plan that I understand of how you're going to blow up the status quo.
Exactly. I agree with you. But let me just say this. Trump laid out a plan. Okay. He laid out a plan. Everybody, well, not everybody went for it, but he laid out a plan. And my question would be, doesn't history, or, you know, the word says we know them by their fruit, right? So as a result, wouldn't, when we're doing our homework, wouldn't it be also incumbent upon us to look at their fruit as well, not just, you know, what their plan is?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. You have to look at all that. Do you have the ability to carry it out based on your past actions? I think those
Exactly.
are very important. And the only thing I'll say about Trump is he talked a lot about what he would do, but he didn't talk about how he would do it. And I think that's important.
Yeah, nobody heard that piece. Okay, we got a couple more minutes before it's time for us to wrap this up. I want to say thank you guys for your time here, but before we wrap this up, I want to make sure a couple things. Some of the things that we talked about, we want to, make sure that the attendees have access to that information. And for each one of you guys, you have some resources. So if you would either mention them or put them on the chat and let people know, like you mentioned, Sheriff, to go to the website and you can find out more information. In fact, I was on your website and you guys have a 48-page document, which I was not going to read all of it, on just police policies. I thought that was pretty comprehensive and interesting. And same thing with you, Chuck. If you guys have information that we need to get out to the public, let's put that on the chat so they can have access to it as well. Janet, make sure that you put that information about voting, getting out the vote on the chat as well. And we'll make that, because this is being recorded and the attendees will have access to that information. But before, with the last 2 minutes, I want to ask each one of the panelists this most important question. Who should Biden pick as vice president? We'll start with you, Robin.
Okay, how did you know? We actually covered this person in my class, Congresswoman Val Demings. Yes, I have been. I mean, I've been pretty. My aunt is Virgie Rollins, so she's the chair for the Black Caucus for the DNC, and I have been actively campaigning behind the scenes or in person, whatever, on my Facebook, everywhere. Congresswoman Val Demings. She is a former sheriff in Florida. And she was an impeachment manager during the impeachment proceedings. So we covered her in our class. We went over her bio. She is just, I think, because the Democrats, Biden needs all the help. Y'all, I don't know if y'all saw that interview he had with Charlemagne. I was telling my people that he need to have somebody sit down next to him. They need some cards. They need to help him. But Congresswoman Val Demings.
All right. Okay. Good deal. Professor Watson, who should Biden pick as president? You got 1 minute. I mean, as vice president.
Well, certainly a woman. I'd like to have a Black woman as vice president, because there's been no more loyal vote for the Democratic Party than Black women nationally.
That's
awesome. Right. All right, Chuck, your thoughts? Unmute.
You know what? I'm with Professor Watson in terms of a woman, and our current governor, I think, would be a good candidate given how she's handled and stood up to opposition. But to be honest with you, I really don't I don't know enough to actually endorse someone publicly, but I do agree that with Professor Watson that it should be a woman, and I feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
All right, we agree on that one. Sheriff Clayton, what's your thoughts?
I think there are a number of good candidates. I think Stacey Abrams, Representative Demings. I think there are a number of good candidates. I believe we have to have an African American female, especially in this time, in this space, because we have to have that voice at the table.
Yes.
That voice at the table provides a perspective that I think we need in this time. So either one of them I think would be good. There are a couple of mayors, I gotta admit. I saw someone just put up Mayor Keisha Bottoms. I've been extremely impressed with her. There are a number of good mayors.
Hey, what do you guys think? What do you think about Muriel Bowers from DC?
Oh, both of them. Yeah, I think both of them would be excellent choices.
Yes. All right.
One of the hardest things that I had to do was to engage in legal action to ensure that Ypsilanti Township residents have the opportunity.
Oh, Monica, I think she.
Yeah, Monica.
Monica.
I'm sorry. Wait. Whoa. I did not know my mic was on. I'm sorry.
Guys,
I'm so
that's
sorry.
okay.
I'm like, it sounds like it's interview.
Sorry about that.
Guys, listen, I want to say again, thank you. It's 12 o'clock. I want to be respectful of your times and everybody else's time here. Thank you so much for being a part of this. If the Washtenaw County Democratic Party let me do it again, you will all be invited back. But remember, we do have to get out and vote. This is our time. Let's make it happen now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.